Okay, welcome back everyone. In this video we're going to set up the Postman request for the get access token. For this you are going to need your client ID, your client secret, and you will also need to make sure we get an authorization code, which we discussed in the last video. So let's get started by looking at the ezeep documentation and checking out this request access token. So first we see here that it's actually a post request, not a get request. So we'll need to change that to a post request, and then we'll take this URL here, which is the OAuth access token, and we'll need to make sure we have that / at the end. Okay, and we need to add some, according to this, we need to add some data to the body as well, which will be form data. So we're going to add that, and we need the grant type, which is authorization code. We need the scope, which is printing, because we want to allow us to print. We need our code, which we're not going to enter just yet, but we'll put the variable there, and our redirect UI. Our redirect UI needs to be the exact same redirect UI we used to get our authorization token. So we should be able to find that in here just to make sure. So it's this one here, so I can just copy and paste that to make sure it's exact. Okay, printing authorization code. I'm just going to check for spelling mistakes here. And now we're going to check the authorization. So the authorization will consist of a username and password, but we don't create a username and password. We already have that in our client ID and our client secret. So the client ID is the username, and the client secret will be the password. Okay, so we have our authorization set as basic auth. We have the body, which is going to send a grant type, authorization code, our scope as printing, and our redirect UI, which is the same redirect UI that we've registered and used to get the authorization code. And we need to add this code here. So if we take our URL, which we created in the last video, we can request a new code. And because I'm already signed in, I should just receive that code here in the response. I shouldn't have to log in again. Perfect, there's our code, and we're just going to test this request to make sure it works before we add any further information. Okay, if I've done everything right, I should get an access token here in the response. Yes, that worked well. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to set up some scripts to get this access token and save it as a variable. So we have some variables up here in some different environments, and what we want to do is we want to save this access token in one of our environments. That's an access token variable, so that we only have to request the access token once, and we don't have to copy and paste it into every request. Because this access token that we claim now, we will be able to use it for an hour, but we also need to use it for every request here. So get printer will need the access token, get printer properties will need the access token, etc. And we don't want to copy and paste that every time we make these requests. It will just be really slow. So I'll show you how to do that now. What I will do is, because this works, we're just going to save that in case we end up refreshing the page and it all goes away. And we need to create a new environment. So we're going to add an environment here, and we're going to call it ezeep. And now we should see that here. So we're going to select that. So it means whatever environment variables we set will be saved into this ezeep here. And we want to create a variable called access token. And we can just do that by going to tests. So these tests will run every time we get a response back from this API. So As we need a variable called access token, let's create one, but we want to make sure it's JSON data. Now, ET-Blue API does return JSON data in a lot of the endpoints, but it's just good practice to make sure we're dealing with JSON data. So we're going to create a variable called JSON response, and it's going to be equal to JSON in capitals, and we're going to pass the information that we get back from the response. To access the response, we can just type response body. Okay, so that now will give us a variable with all this as JSON data. And then we want to access the access token. So first we'll create a variable called access token. And that will be equal to the JSON response, but we don't want all of it. We only want the access token here. So if we just spell it exactly like this, then that should include our access token there. And then what do we need to do that? We need to set that as an environment variable. Where can I find the command for that? Well, luckily, we have these little snippets at the side, and here's one set an environment variable. So that will just make things easier for us. So first we need to set the variable key, which is a string. So that will be access token, and the variable value is going to be this access token here. Okay, so let's just double check we've spelled everything correctly. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we need to test this now, and because we already used our last code to get this access token, we're going to have to get another code, but luckily we have our URL here, so that's nice and easy. Okay, so here's our code, and we are going to put this in the body here. So now when this happens, we should be able to see a new variable added. Okay, so there's our access token, which we just created, and here is the value of the access token. So now we should be able to access this variable from any of these other endpoints, and I'll show you how to do that when we get started on the Get Printer. Okay, then I will see you in the next video for Get Printer.